Pleasant surprise. My guest is Johnson Chukwu. He's the Group Managing Director at Cowrie Assets Management. He was supposed to join us virtually. That was their agreement. But he just popped into the studio. Pleasant surprise. Welcome to you, Chief Chukwu.
Chief Nancy, thank you for having me.
Welcome to the program. We haven't seen after the election, but we'll come back to the election. We haven't seen, yes. The last time we saw was before the election.
Yeah, before even the presidential
election.
election.
Yes, so we'll talk about that in a bit. Let me have your insights about the MPC meeting that is underway right now. What are your own macro perspectives vis-a-vis what you think the MPC would do today? Which way do you think that the MPC will swing?
Well, the way I would look at it is what I would have voted if I was a member of the MPC. And my vote would have been to hold rates at current levels. If you recall the last MPC meeting, they increased rates. But beyond that, the increments we've seen in rates has not translated into lower inflation. We've seen inflation move up by 9 basis points from 21.82% to 21.91%. Beyond that, you also have to deal with the issue of contradictory economic factors that are currently tugging the economy in different directions. We just finished the national elections, so you're going to have a transition to a new government. Beyond that, then you also have to consider the fact that the economy, in terms of economic recovery, the economy grew by only 3.1% last year, down from about 3.4% the preceding year. In as much as you saw an improvement in growth from 2.25% to 2.54% in the last quarter, from the third quarter to the last quarter of last year. But those growths are still suboptimal. We saw an agricultural sector that has slowed down because of issues around insecurity, around flooding. You still have high level of unemployment. So the focus of the MPC should be, how do we stimulate economic growth? Given the fact that you are trying to fight inflation, and inflation's pressures are not driven by excess liquidity. And even the excess liquidity in the economy is not driven by private credit or private sector credit expansion. It's largely driven by ways and means funding of the federal government. So you really cannot stifle the economy, particularly the private sector, by further increasing rates when that effort has not led to a lower inflation rate. And most importantly, the inflationary pressure is not driven by excess liquidity. So my take would be, let's keep rates at current level and watch the environment. The other factor that will be affecting the MPC is the issue of pressure on exchange rates. We've seen, despite the positive trade balance we witnessed in the last report, we are still seeing depletion in reserve. So the question you want to ask yourself is, do I want to lower rates? If I lower rates, then I could actually see more pressure on the FX because you could see an uptick in demand for imports. So in that wise, you are caught between the pressures to increase rates and the pressures to lower rates. And if you look at those pressures, so your most appropriate decision should be to keep rates at current level.
So the decision to keep rate at common level, I'm trying to...
At current level?
Yes, at current level, which is at 17.5%. I'm trying to understand what may be the basis for that. Should it still be inflation taming, or should it be giving the economy a bit of stability? I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely. I think what the MPC will be saying, look, we increased rate to 17.5% at the last meeting. So let's watch and see the impact of that. Because there's always what we call lag effect. If you take a decision, an economic decision today, the impact is not going to be instantaneous. So the increase we had in monetary policy rate to 17.5% is just a period of 2 months. So we've not seen that impact. So of course, if you look at the February inflation figure, it's not based on the figures as at March. So the figure you reported for February also had a lag effect, given when the data was collected. So if you now want to increase rate, you have to ask yourself, have I fully weighed in the impact of the increment I had in January? Or in the alternative, if you want to reverse that, will that be consistent?
Okay, why
Would
not
that
take
be
a look at this scenario? So sorry to butt you in. MPR was raised at the January meeting 17.5%. Bear in mind that inflation depreciated in December, and it took a lot of people by surprise because December ordinarily is a holiday season. A lot of people attend to spending more, but that did not happen. And inflation, it was still high, but it just decreased a bit. Still, the MPC increased rate, which a lot of people said, okay, we're seeing inflation decelerating. Why increase rate? Why not even hold it at that point? February inflation, uptick, yes. January inflation, uptick actually. So you've seen two upticks as against one depreciation in December. So where does it really now leave the MPC? How do they, that go?
Okay, you have to recognize the fact that the drop we saw in December was a flash.
Flash of what?
Yeah, it was a flash effect.
Was it the currency crunch? But as at that time, it was people were still spending old money.
Yeah, people were spending money, and remember that what happened in December was a lot of Nigerians come home in December, and then you have some level of stability in exchange rate. And when you have stability in exchange rate, you certainly have that impact on import-induced inflation. Of course, MBS has come up with another category, which is based on import-induced impact on on consumer prices. So if you have a group, a consumption group that has a major drop, you could have that flash effect. But clearly, it wasn't a consistent pattern. And every one of us knew that it wasn't going to be a sustainable pattern because the basic factor driving inflation had not fundamentally changed. Issue of food prices had not fundamentally changed. Issue of pressure on exchange rate had not fundamentally changed. Issues around the price of energy, fuel, had nothing fundamentally changed. So we knew that any drop, any blip we saw in that trend was going to be temporary. So it couldn't have been a basis for anybody to make a judgment call and say, okay, look, rates have dropped, let's inflation had dropped, let's reduce monetary policy rates.
What other headwinds do you think that may be considered at this meeting? Headwind, of course, you've talked about inflation. You've talked about also the foreign exchange risk. Are there some other headwinds that you think that members of the MPC will be considering right now in the room that we may not even be seeing?
Yeah, I think one of the things they should consider is the fact that the global financial system is going through some turmoil. We've just seen the acquisition of Credit Suisse, a 167-year-old bank, by UBS, and that acquisition was basically forced by the Swiss Central Bank. We've seen a collapse of SVP, that is
Silicon Valley
Bank, a $22 billion bank balance sheet. And then we've also seen other smaller regional banks go down with it. We've seen the First Republic Bank collapse. We've seen a Signature Bank collapse in America. And what that has happened, and remember that Credit Suisse had a balance sheet of more than $1.6 trillion, which is more than the entire GDP of Africa. So with that collapse, with that first acquisition, the entire global financial system is a state of severe apprehension. And you should also know that because of that, if the global economy financial market goes into a spin, it certainly affects the Nigerian financial system. And we know that when the banking system is going through difficulties or going through a period of instability, credit expansion drops.
Okay, let me just hold your thoughts there. Let's take a break, and let's use this break. If my team is listening, let's take a look. Let's play back what Godwin Emefiele, the governor of the central bank, did say at the African Central Banks conference in Joburg, just as Johannesburg, just a few days ago, talking about banking regulations, talking about what you just spoke about, the collapse of SVB, and what is being expected by central bankers to do at this point. If we have that, we can play that very quickly and we'll come back to the conversation.
In Nigeria, people have always said that Nigerian banking system appears to be one of the most regulated, in fact, stringently regulated banking system. we've done a couple of things. We're not saying that there are no runs. We are not saying that there are no cases where there are banks run into liquidity crisis in Nigeria, but we try as much as possible to make sure that we've done our best to make sure that we protect the banks and insulate the banking system from serious occurrences like this. I think it's only in Nigeria, amongst very, very few countries in the world, that you will hear about the Central Bank of Nigeria insisting that if you, a bank, you collect, say, for instance, $100 from a customer as deposit, that today, $32.5 of that money must be kept at the CBN. It is to keep that fund to meet this kind of situations when there are crises. It's only in Nigeria, or one of those countries in the world, Nigeria, that you will find that we insist that banks must maintain a particular level of specified liquid assets as a percentage of their deposits, which we call the liquidity ratio. It's in Nigeria, one of the countries in the world, Nigeria, that you will find that we insist that banks must maintain some minimum level of capital adequacy ratios. It will be difficult for you to run away from crises like this, where banks, in an attempt to make money, take unnecessary risks that will crystallize and create problems and may lead to their demise.
That's what Godwin Emefiele, the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, are talking about banking regulation and the vigilance that should be on banks right now, especially with the demise, almost demise of some banks that one would ordinarily not think about. Johnson Chukwu, the group managing director at Carry Asset Management, is still with me right here, live in person, not virtual this time. Okay, Mr. Chukwu, you heard what the central bank governor did say earlier. Do you think that the CBN is right, is on top of the money there? And also at this meeting, he did mention, and that struck me, he did mention why the central banks went so tight on crypto at the beginning, and that the CBN was, a lot of people hounded on them and all of that. But do you think that the CBN is also justified doing that, vis-a-vis what we've seen somehow right now around the crypto market? And what do you have to say about what he mentioned earlier?
Okay, starting from the crypto market, the basic thing that the financial regulator has a duty to maintain financial system stability. If any new financial instruments crops into the market that is largely not understood, not well understood, that begins to build up size that could have a systemic impact. And because when we talk of financial instrument, there's going to be some movement from one financial asset to that financial instrument. Like if you talk of cryptocurrency, when people are holding cryptocurrency, they are buying it with dollar. So they are converting in other countries their local currency to dollar and holding cryptos. So if you have a sudden collapse of that asset class, it has a way of impacting on, at the minimum, investor confidence or the banking public confidence in the banking system. And you also see a situation where if there's a huge loss of financial assets, it will affect households. And they could have overall impact on financial system stability. So for me, it was understandable when the central banks, not just Nigerian central bank, most global central banks had their apprehensions about cryptocurrency because they saw movement in conventional asset classes into an unconventional asset class, which was largely unregulated and which were being created by individuals. Private money was being created. So it was something that, because the creators of those things, we are not under any form of regulation. And so that was why those concerns were there. So the concerns were well founded. Of course, we've seen the collapses we've seen in the cryptocurrency market. And we've seen the impact of that, which has also led to most other global financial regulators saying, look, we must regulate this instrument because it could have systemic impact on the entire banking system.
Okay. If we, now let's talk about the banking system, what he said. Do you think he's also right on the money in terms of maintaining strict vigilance on banks? You were a former MD of a bank. Do you think that Nigerian banks are adequately regulated or under-regulated or over-regulated? Where do you think I just said adequately regulated, over-regulated, under-regulated, or regulated.
Well, I think I'll take
Because they have the former bank MD as
I
a
think they
central bank governor.
I think they tend towards being over-regulated.
Oh, being over-regulated?
Yes, I think Nigerian banks tend towards being over-regulated. If I have the liberty of time, I can reel out several directives that come from central bank on regular intervals. At regular intervals, we have regulations on the amount of liquidity they have. In terms of liquidity management in the banking system, central banks' approach has been very sporadic. A lot of times, the banks are not certain how much their liquidity ratio should be, not in terms of liquidity ratio, in terms of how much the central bank is going to take as cash reserve from their banking force.
Well, it's been almost certain for like 2 years,
yes,
until lately that it was increased.
Yeah, but
to
you've also seen
32.5%.
instances where debits come at periods when the banks have prepared their liquidity to go for foreign exchange bills.
Except when they have a malpractice, then they are debited.
You know, it's beyond malpractice. I give you instances. The banks will tell you, the bank treasurer will tell you that when they are preparing to go for bid for foreign exchange for their customers, a lot of times they wake up and realize that the balances with the central bank have been debited.
For what exactly?
For cash reserve. So that for me.
How often is cash reserve supposed?
Cash
reserve, is it not the reserve of your money with the central bank?
In the past, it used to be
the percentage of your money.
In the past, it used to be at the end of a month.
Mm-hmm.
Then the central bank will determine your level of
capital adequacy
deposits.
Okay.
Your level of deposits, and based on your end of month balance sheet, they will take the cash reserve. But it's no longer the practice. So for me, that's an excessive regulation. Then you have the issues of several directives, including the recent directives on the tenure of bank CEOs and bank executive directors and non-executive directors. So, and I think these things are coming. Some of them are a bit sporadic. So if you ask me, I believe that we tend towards over-regulation in the banking system. But having said that, it is better to be over-regulated than to be under-regulated because of the importance of the financial system as major arbitrators in the economy. If you have under-regulation like we used to have in the 90s,
where you had 89 banks.
So the risk of under-regulation is far more than the risk of over-regulation. Over-regulation for the Nigerian banking system also has worked for them. They're saying that, look, as it stands today, the banks are making so much of positive net interest margin because the central bank has effectively encouraged the banks to charge more in terms of their cost, their lending rate, while not really forcing them to pay more in terms of deposit rate. So the banks are also not complaining because they know that they have beneficiaries or that even the overregulation has some other flip side of it.
Do you think they can complain? They can
that's
they
also
complain
part of that's part of the, also part of
or
the
perhaps when they are with their guy, they will complain.
That's
in
also
the
part
room.
of the overregulation. The bank MDs do not have the courage to speak up.
Please speak publicly.
Yes.
Do you have that abroad, where banks speak publicly against the Fed, for example, or even other central banks, or even the Reserve Bank of South Africa?
No.
Is it not?
Elsewhere in the world, a bank CEO can speak up his mind.
Yeah, about the economy, about what he or she thinks.
How many times have you interviewed bank MDs sitting on the desk today?
They don't want to come.
Yeah, because
when
they tell you, we don't want to say anything that will offend the CBN.
Yes. I say they don't want to say anything. I don't want to speak. But they can talk to you, but they won't want to come out publicly.
Yeah, so that's it. So what do you consider that as?
Okay. Now let's move over to another issue, the elections. Like I mentioned earlier, we haven't seen since after the presidential elections. Talk to me about your modeling around the outlook, especially after elections, the presidential election, and now we have a couple of states that have been declared governorship as well as assembly polls. Is it a bear or a bull kind of modeling for you? Because I'm struggling to understand where many business people fall in terms of their modeling or analysis. Speak to me about yours.
Okay, mine is that we should expect if I have to use between the beer and the bull, I will stay on the beer side.
Oh, on the beer side.
Yes, and the basic thing here, the election has not made the minimum expectation of most Nigerians.
Is that filtering into business?
Yeah, so it's giving, you know, some of us had actually projected that immediately after the election, if the election process had made the minimum expectation of Nigerians, not the outcome, the process, that would have seen a lot of excitement after the election.
Excitement, people's excitement?
Yeah, if people felt that.
Or is it excitement around investment?
No, just in the first place. You know, one of the things you know that if you take for example the equity market, the equity market rallies when there is optimism in the economy. And it declines when there's pessimism in the economy or when there are doubts in the society. So when people are exuberant, they make investments. When people are excited about the future, they make investments. So sometimes they tell you that the equity performance can actually be used to measure the pulse of the society. And we've also seen in the past 1 week, the equity market has struggled. In fact, since after the election, the equity market has largely struggled. So what does that mean? It simply means, even if you go out there and feel the mood of the people, you don't see the excitement that should follow a national election if the election had gone according to the expectation of Nigerians. You see, what Nigerians are really...
Is it expectation of Nigerians or expectation of over 12 million Nigerians that did not vote, for example, the president-elect?
No,
because about 8.7 voted for the president-elect.
I think it's way beyond that. A lot of people were frustrated on voting. There was no voter apathy, but there was violence. I know a friend of mine who told... There was no voter apathy.
But we had about 25 or about close to 25 million in terms of voter turnout compared to 87 million that collected PVCs.
You see, Nancy, that's why I say there was no voter apathy. I can give you, if what I have heard from people who we are speaking of, their personal experiences, and what I've also read in the media. I know of a community in my senatorial zone. They did not bring materials there. In my own village, we kept calling because I voted in the village. They got there by 2 p.m. for the presidential election, National Assembly election. They got there by 2 p.m. For this other community, they got there like 5 p.m. And it was agreed that they should defer the election to the next day. That election has not held till today.
They did not hold the election in that community?
Yes, it's a large chunk of that community.
A community of polling units?
Yes, I can tell you specifically, Ebreba and Ohofia. A large chunk of those communities did not witness the presidential and National Assembly elections.
They did not vote there?
I can tell you that for free.
How many communities make up, how many, of course there will be many polling units in that community.
I'm talking of several polling units.
And we have
in some instances,
already.
You have places where there were 15 or 20 polling units and they brought 5 BVAS machines. So how else do you want to frustrate people from voting? Do you think those people are happy today? They are despondent. A friend of mine told me he went to vote in Nikon Town, in Lekki Axis, that when they were about to start voting, people came and drove them away.
Voter suppression?
Yes. And they went back on in the mid-afternoon, and you can imagine not everybody would have come back. So
from from your analysis right now, all of this translates, all of this, the impact will be on the economy, or the impact is already being felt on the markets?
The impact already being felt in the market, the impact, the expectation that we all had that we're going to have a smooth and free and fair election seem to have been betrayed by INEC. And that has dampened the spirit of Nigerians, including dampened their confidence in their society, in their country. People are saying, look, what kind of country is this? Why can't we do simple things easily? What does it take to hold elections? Why would I be driven away when I want to cast my vote? Why would votes be balloting be done and people will come and burn it and nobody has been arrested? Okay,
Mr. Chukwu, let's take a look at, because this is actually a business and a financial show. So we don't do things the way politicians do it. We are perhaps more, how will I put it, more
objective,
more
rational.
More rational, you know. More straightforward, as it were. Now,
I'm more analytical.
I'm more analytical. Yesterday, in the last couple of days, we've being on the election situation room, I've been an anchor there. So yesterday I had the opportunity to ask a former INEC director of voter education and publicity when we're talking about the process of this election. And I asked a simple question, which I also want to ask you, because yesterday when his reasons, I was not too convinced, which is, we are all bank account holders. We have close to about 56 million Nigerians that have accounts in banks. You can walk into a bank right now and your ATM has expired, or even once you are being given an ATM card right now. That happened to me even last week. So I was asking, I said, what is it exactly that the financial system in this same country, Nigeria, we are not out, you can have the same service? Meanwhile, INEC and the electoral process is still lagging behind. Some will say, okay, it's law or whatever it is. But in this same country, you have a financial system where a Nigerian can walk into a bank account holder. Another issue could be get more people financially included. That is not part of this. You get into a bank and you're being given your bank card with a chip on it. You have a BVN. When I go to the bank and you want to make a certain transaction, they will say, madam, face the camera. They snap your picture. They check if it's the same one on their system, or you do a thumbprint. And I was asking, is it different, or what exactly is it? Are there lessons that we can learn from the financial system to the other process that is seemingly bureaucratic?
Nancy, it's not a matter of lesson. It's a matter of willingness to do the right things. I don't think there's anything within the financial system that they cannot do. They have not adopted in the electoral process. The promises were made on the electoral promises. You're going to go there. You either use your fingers, your face, to be validated. And once you are validated as a voter, they give you a ballot box, ballot papers. You go to the cubicle, thumbprint, drop in the boxes, individual boxes, and then immediately after the election, the result is counted to everybody's view. And then when it's counted, it's recorded in the form, whatever they call it. And then that form is captured in the beavers and uploaded. And that once you go to IREV, you can immediately see your result. What is so difficult in that? And they also told her that once they are uploading, they will upload the number of accredited voters. And then this is uploaded in the cloud. So at any point in time, INEC will see the number of accredited voters. And then they will compare it to the number of actual votes cast. And then if there is an excess of votes cast above what they have in accreditation, that polling unit or that point will be cancelled. That's what INEC told us. And that's what gave a lot of people the confidence to go and struggle to get their voters card. What did you witness? I can share with you the experience I had on Saturday. In my village, the electoral officers came on time for the first time. They were there by 7:38, so we were all happy. We started voting like 9 a.m. In fact, by 2, my own polling unit were finished voting. In my own polling unit. The entire ward had finished voting by 2:30. 3, we had finished counting. We said upload. They said they can't upload. They will go to the ward collection center. They said upload from the polling unit, which is what the INEC said will happen. They only uploaded of the 17.
Did they have network issues there?
There was no network issue. I'm talking of in my own polling unit, there is a 4G network.
Okay.
I've stayed in the village and done interviews with you. That quality of network is there. They did not upload. They went to the collection center, the ward collection center. There are 17 polling units in my village, in my ward. They went to the ward collection center. That was by 3:30. They were in the ward collection center doing nothing. By 7, they had only uploaded only 3 polling units. They packed up. We said, okay, the ward collection center, your job is to collect the results at the ward level and announce. That is what the INEC regulation says. You will collect the results from the polling units that make up a ward and announce at the ward collection center. They told us the collection officer did not come.
Okay, because we just have to leave now. And director should just give me 30 seconds. I want to ask this question, and I would like you to answer very quickly. The elections and the social adhesion, the narratives that we're seeing right now. You reside in Lagos. Of course, your village is in Abia. I was born and brought up in Lagos. I schooled there. I speak Yoruba. I studied Yoruba in school. badly I passed. I can read it. You know, I reside here now in Abuja, especially coming from that Lagos axis. Lagos being the central economy of the country. What is the signal of that? And do you think that will have an impact on the market and the economy?
Well, it will have an impact, but if the government comes in and begin to do the right things, this impact will wear out. We've seen a lot of narrative that shouldn't be. We've seen ethnic issues come up, which shouldn't be. But I also believe that these are all the practices of politics in the Nigerian environment. Even in my home state, we saw people also trying to identify who is from which part and who should move away from which part. But these things are sentiments we all Nigerian politicians play on. But the key thing is, what kind of leadership are we going to have going forward? If we have the right form of leadership, leaders will define culture, leaders will define values. If you have right leadership in a country, all these issues about tribe, about race, will moderate. I mean, Rwanda is a living example. After a genocide, the Rwandans no longer talk about Hutus and Tutsis. They say we are Rwandese. Yes. So we can also have a leader that will propel us into that level of unity.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. We'll talk again sometime soon. Thank you very much, Johnson Chukwu, for joining us. I've been speaking with Johnson Chukwu, who is the Group Managing Director at Cowrie Asset Management, and we've been talking about the MPC market election results as well as the economy. That's the much you can take on today's edition of the program. The news is up next, and I will see you all again next time. Be the best you can be the change that you want to see. I am Nancy Naji. Bye now.